everybody. Welcome back to another week of PROPEL K12 webinar series. I can't tell you when it's going to stop because it seems like every week we get together, there's always something new within education, K12, that we really want to talk about, nuance, interrogate, think through, challenge ourselves, even provide opportunities of applause. Because there are some school districts and school leaders who are doing some amazing, innovative, creative things right now in their school districts in the face of all that we're experiencing. So my co-conspirator today is Dr. Lucretia Brown. So excited for her to be with us today. She's also a board member for PROPEL K12, and we're going to talk a little bit about the removal of DE&I. We talked some weeks before about the Department of Education being dismantled, DE&I funds being rescinded, right? But there are a lot of school district superintendents, cabinet members, and principals who reach out to us at PROPEL K12 and are saying, we have stuff on our website about, DE&I and should we remove it and how should we frame it and what about the work that we're doing? We don't want to be, tapped on the shoulder and then we lose money, right? So we want to talk a little bit today about that. So, Dr. Brown, as we think about DE&I and the thought of framing, reframing, getting rid of, adding to, a lot of school leaders are curious, nervous, not sure about what they should do related to websites, strategic plans, budgets. Talk a little bit about what you see is happening and how we can get ahead of that.
Sure. So I gotta tell you, when I consider the state of DE and I in public education right now, I feel like it's the pendulum shifting, far in the other direction or the opposite direction. We've been here before. I now can say that I was super fortunate as I was coming along in my doctoral studies and my early positions that were DEI related, but we didn't call it that. I was never allowed, if you will, to just use those terms. We talked about creating spaces for all students to succeed. In fact, I was a research project manager at the Success for All Foundation. And you could go through that website. Maybe now they have those terms, but we didn't use those terms. We knew that it required change management, continuous improvement, things that were going to allow our service organization, right? Because public districts, public school districts are service organizations. We serve our services to provide education. Service organizations always have to adapt and adjust to the external environment. So when you think of, and that's something that's not commonplace when you're thinking about leadership and strategy and strategic planning in all public school systems. There are some forward-thinking, progressive school districts out there that I'm preaching to the choir, if you will. But there are others that haven't adopted, it's been taboo to adopt some of that corporate or business industry language. And so sometimes we need to take a deep breath as public educators and figure out what we can extract and adopt in terms of emerging and best practices from corporate or private industry, and how do we make that work for the clientele we serve? Because we don't get to say who shows up at the front door on the first day of school, the 53rd day of school, or the 169th day of school, right? Because that happens. We're a transient, mobile society, and that doesn't mean that everyone's living in poverty. There are high income folks that are, jet setting across, and they want to have a good, strong public school system, particularly when you think of housing prices and housing values where they choose to for their family to reside. So I've always had to build my DEI work on organizational theory, change management, all of the classical theorists. And so that's why I'm not nervous now. It's no secret that I've been in a school district in Virginia where the state administration shifted and everybody was nervous and coming down to me. And I was like, I read it because I need to be his executive orders, right? I read them. But that was it. Okay, fine. We're not talking D and I. Good. Okay, great. Because that brings emotions to the table that made quite frankly, if I'm being honest, life challenging as a chief equity officer. You served as a chief equity officer. It is hard emotionally more than it is technically because people bring their grandparents' emotions, their emotions to the table. They think we're trying to hand out something for free when really we're trying to prepare the school system to be agile and be able to adapt to provide a good product.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you did brought that up, and I think that that theory, organizational theory, is certainly new to many educational practitioners who've not had that right in a master's related class or doctoral class. Right, it wasn't anything that I received in undergrad. Right, and so even
Mhm,
serving as a classroom teacher, high school special education teacher, I had no idea what organizational change management was. Right, or
mhm,
inclusive practices because that just wasn't my area. But when I was a master's and then my PhD program, of course, I saw that more and more. So I think that for practitioners, where this may be some new jargon language, you talk about bringing corporate into education, and I've always said, Dr. Brown, that we need to treat schools, the leaders need to treat schools as businesses.
mhm,
Instead of a nice to have. Oh, it's nice that we have this. This is a great opportunity. No, it's treated like a business because when you're not getting as the leader or the CEO or the senior leadership in your organization, you're not getting what you need, you're going to start tapping on the shoulders of those to provide you what you need, right?
mhm,
And so I think it's incumbent, and now that I think about solutions, and then we're in this solution area space now. And if you've been watching us for these last few weeks, you know we always give you a perspective and we always share with you a solution. If you're going to watch our show week to week, month to month, it's silly for you to come here and not leave with something. So as I think about what Dr. Brown was saying related to change, organizational change management, I think it's also important that the senior leadership start to talk about what that looks like. So if they have framed everything in DE&I, which is great, um, the thought around framing it in continuous improvement or change management is the same concept, right? It truly is. And you should look at the areas within finance, with the areas within policies, the areas within leadership, recruitment, hiring, and retention. You need to look in all of the areas, student achievement and outcomes, and so I think that the messaging that takes place at the senior leadership level needs to cascade to the other levels. The directors, the managers, the supervisors, the teachers, the staff. It should cascade throughout the whole organization because you don't want people in parts of your organization saying, hey, we're focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, which you are, but we framed it as organizational change management. You want that to be spoken throughout the entire ecosystem. Your
mhm.
thoughts on a solution, Dr. Brown, for those who are listening?
Yeah. So I always think that it's a multi-layered sort of balanced approach. So reframing, when you think of one of the common organizational theories, if you will, is it Cotter? Unfreeze, freeze, refreeze, very simple, right? So how do you shift folks' language um, and give them the alternative language or the replacement language in a user-friendly, easy way? Because by the time you get down to the teachers, teachers don't have time for that. They're in the classroom. You want them focused on instructional practice. You really want them to continue to do what they're doing, right? So the change barometer, if you will, would be, I would say, minimalistic at the teacher level because they're on the front lines. They aren't going to change instructional practice because I did my master's work on professional development for teachers in learning support classrooms and looking at neurodiversity and learning styles. So I watered it down, right? Because you go in there talking about neurodiversity, you're losing them already. Um, but learning styles, and they loved it because it was teaching them how to use their practice in a way that helps them adapt and adjust no matter what comes in to that learning support classroom because you don't know what's coming in there, right? And everything you learned in that textbook, yeah, you got to know it, but you have to be agile and able to adapt. So teachers are really good at that. So I think it's a matter of giving them the language, communicating the shift, but not the departure from the true tenets of being an organization that can serve all students, regardless of how they show up, what social identity, what socioeconomic status. I think the biggest change would be more so for middle management, principals, directors across organizations. Those are the ones that have to sort of pull up the workflows that the teachers are leading, and have standardized practices and understanding how to embed and shift to organizational change management and continuous improvement while they're moving their schools and their district toward their strategic goals with their progress. So there are some districts out there that are doing really well with embedding continuous improvement practices in their routine operations. And then as it goes up, the responsibility and the bandwidth becomes wider and larger for the executive leadership team, because they absolutely need to adopt that as their allocating funds for programs, as they are adopting, revising policies, as they're interfacing with school boards, as they're preparing their district and doing their forecasting, whether it's enrollment, new school construction, or even renovations across all of those key operational and academic areas.
Dope. Hey, I told y'all she was brilliant. I love having conversations with Dr. Brown because she just makes me think about education just with a whole new lens and perspective. So, Dr. Brown, thank you for that. If you know we're right at 10 minutes, you guys know that we do this. We give you 10 minutes because we know that most of y'all will give yourselves 10 to 15 minutes between Zoom meetings. Or when one class ends, you've got 10 minutes before the next class begins. So we try to pack these conversations into 10 minutes. Keep watching us for more things related to educational current events. We like to bring you fresh new perspectives and solutions each and every week. We do have a conference, virtual conference coming up in June. Stay tuned for more information on that. And we are designing a few courses after being tapped on the shoulder for a few K-12 school leaders, particularly at the cabinet level, principals and some teachers who are saying, hey, we want courses. We hear you guys each week, but we'd like to have some of you unpack that in a longer, more of a course, a cohort model. So stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate y'all. We'll see you all next week. Take care.
Yeah, care.